welcome to Unbiased. This is the flagship podcast of Absolom Attorneys. My name is Simbarashi Absolom Rondoti, and joining us today is a pace setter and entrepreneur par excellence, Victor Mapunga. Victor, how goes it? How are you doing?
No, I'm doing all right. Thank you for having me, Simba.
Great. Victor is an accomplished, seasoned serial entrepreneur with a lot of tremendous work in Fintech, and you are the founder of FlexID. But I'll just let you introduce yourself so that I don't do a disservice to the great work that you've done.
No, thank you. So I'm the founder and CEO of FlexID Technologies, which is a blockchain and crypto-based company, which is based out of Singapore. And we develop blockchain-based solutions for financial services, financial technology, healthcare, insurance, education, etc. So it's something that that started from a personal point of view, but it soon became something that became quite a global phenomenon, if you will.
Yeah, and I remember seeing you on the World Economic Forum website. You've done something with the World Economic Forum.
Yeah. So in 2021, our company became the first Zimbabwean company to be selected by the World Economic Forum under what they call the Tech Pioneers, which is every year they select 100 companies globally that they believe are going to make tremendous change in whatever industry they're working in. So, companies like Airbnb, Spotify, Google, etc. Have all been part of that. So we're quite honored to be the first company from Zim, and what that has really allowed us to do is to also now have access to a much more globalized ecosystem of innovators, entrepreneurs, access to platforms like the Davos in Switzerland and numerous other sort of events where we really take full advantage when it comes to how best we then get our business out there and how best we can then make those connections.
Oh, really impressive, Victor. And I must say, it's not every day that a Zimbabwean startup goes and is recognized at a global stage. So this is something that I think is phenomenal. I also think that you are in a space which is not well known in the mass market, Fintech, cryptocurrency. Can you tell us a bit about how that is working in that space, as well as the challenges that you're facing in that space?
Yeah, so I started off, my exposure to cryptocurrency started around 2015, 2016. And this is during a time when I was traveling quite a lot to different institutions, whether it was at Yale University in the US or it was at King's College in London. And this was the buzzword at the time. Crypto was really something that was booming, right? And it dawned on me upon having multiple conversations with sort of different specialists in the area that this is a technology that could have a quite tremendous change and impact across sub-Saharan Africa, because we're an emerging market and it solves a lot of problems to do with access to financial services. Okay. So one of the biggest things obviously is a lot of people get confused to say, but what is this stuff? What is blockchain? What is fintech? What is crypto? So one of the key things I always like doing is to differentiating those things. Mm-hmm. So the first thing is cryptocurrencies, right? We're talking about any form of digital assets that are built on top of blockchain technology.
Okay.
And blockchain technology is decentralized ledger infrastructure, which just means, in very simple terms, we're taking central databases and we're decentralizing them across the entire world, such that your data or your information is not stored by one server or one database. Instead, it's stored across a network across the entire world. Okay. And one of the key advantages this now does is it allows solutions, especially financial service solutions, to be quite easily accessible, to be borderless, to be instant in terms of settling transactions, and to be extremely verifiable. So you can trust information that's on the blockchain because you can see from when it started up until to the current point that you're viewing that information.
And I can imagine that it will have, on the aspect of verifiability, it will have a lot of use cases in financial regulation, prevention of money laundering, and so on and so forth. I'm going to ask you, the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe recently introduced, well, not very recently, but they introduced the financial technology regulatory sandbox. In other words, they are trying to bring in this technology platform which enables anyone with an innovation in financial technology to test the platform on that sandbox. What's your view of the sandbox and the guidelines that they published?
Yeah, so the first thing is I would definitely applaud the central bank for taking the step forward to actually introduce some kind of a framework in the sandbox that allows companies to innovate. On the second aspect of things, innovation tends to precede regulation. So what it essentially means is that you cannot contain innovation under any particular framework up until it's already in the market. Okay. So what this essentially means is that a sandbox is great for the regulator to be able to see what's happening. But a sandbox in itself does not actually create the conducive environment whereby companies can actually blossom upon doing different iterations and experimentation. What we need in Zimbabwe is actually a framework that allows companies to implement solutions, and then regulators have the ability to now go as these companies scale. Because you want to enable companies to be able to develop their solutions to the maximum potential possible. You want investors to have confidence that if they invest in a company in your country, it's not going to be regulated out of business. So you reduce the risk profile of investing in a crypto company, or you reduce the risk profile of investing in a fintech company. Okay. Because that's one of the key things that we need in Zimbabwe. It's that FDI that then comes into that startup sector. Okay. But the reason it can come is if they see that the regulator and the central bank will not shut down these companies if they start to scale. So a very good example of a tobacco that we had in Zimbabwe, one massive franchise company that started its own remittance service. And that service was suspended when already it was in the market. Yeah. So that inconveniences consumers, yeah, right? And it also inconveniences investors. Yeah. So what we really need is a framework where you can guarantee the continuity of these companies such that you actually enable investors to take a risk and take a bet.
To invest in them. Okay. I have seen, that in the United States we've heard of the Benny Madoffs of this world. In here we've had pyramid scandals, people who prey on the public and take advantage using slight chicanery, fraud, to try and get people to part with their hard-earned money under the guise of an investment scheme. So I would say that a sandbox would be a necessary intervention at the very least to prevent such from happening, or to prevent the financing of terrorism, for instance. So in as much as I get what you're saying about the need to promote innovation, I also think it's impossible to do that without encouraging people who, prey on innocent citizens, who want to dispossess innocent citizens of their hard-earned money. What would be your comment to that?
Yeah, so the first thing I'll say is criminals will always exist, regardless of regulatory frameworks or policies. Okay. Criminals are criminals by nature. Okay. So whatever tool is available at that moment, criminals will take advantage of it. All right. So what it essentially means is that you cannot over-regulate something based on the potential for crime to happen. What essentially you want to do is you want to see how legitimate companies can actually operate and how they should operate. And that gives you an idea of what illegitimate services are. When you have something like, say, a crypto ban in Zimbabwe, for example, what it means is you cannot have legitimate crypto companies doing business with the central bank, doing business with the normal banks. And what this leaves consumers to use are platforms that are developed elsewhere that are not regulated here. Okay. So just because, in Zimbabwe there is no company that officially has a license to operate in that capacity, it means a user is going to use an offshore platform like Binance, they're going to use an offshore platform like FTX, and all those things then happen and your consumers and your citizens are not protected.
FTX, Sam Bankman-Fried.
Yes.
All right. Okay. So you reckon that it's better for us to risk by letting the market decide who wins and who doesn't?
Yes, and by allowing our government to also earn taxes from these innovations. Because as it stands, when you don't have official businesses doing transactions in your country, what people do is they use these offshore companies. And these offshore companies do not remit any taxes for the users that they garner from Zimbabwe. So that's lost revenue in the fiscus of the government, and no one can actually account for how much that is. Their estimates in terms of black market crypto transactions in Zimbabwe range from $50 million a day to over $100 million in transactional volumes every single day. And there is no instrument, framework, policy, infrastructure, or institution that is able to capture or create any value from those transactions. So imagine we're saying that we're moving hundreds of millions of dollars annually, but there is no way we can actually ensure that part of that money goes back into public services, that we know that people aren't doing these illegal activities anyways. So once you have something that is more localized, it's much easier to then sort of create the framework on how you then govern it. The key thing we're saying is you cannot create a governance framework for something that doesn't yet exist.
Okay.
So you want it to exist first. And then you create the regulatory framework as these companies go. Because you might be surprised, right? For example, when I hear things like anti-terrorism and terrorism, I'm like, who in Zimbabwe is funding terrorism?
And what is?
And what is that? So some of these things, they are financial regulations that have been imposed at a much higher level in sophisticated countries. But the impact that has in developing countries is very different. Yeah. So when the US says we want strict AML, is they want to avoid another 9/11, right? They want to avoid, Al-Qaeda. They want to avoid all these terrorist institutions from moving money. But what that does is those same regulations then apply to Tindo in Bali. He's not. He doesn't have. Any.
But better safe than sorry, Victor. Better safe than sorry.
Unfortunately,
do we want to wait until Tindo is institutionalized by a terrorist cell somewhere outside Zimbabwe, and they grow to become what Boko Haram is now in Nigeria? Why not impose those regulations now so that we are better off safe than sorry?
Yeah, and Boko Haram existed before Bitcoin. Same with Al-Qaeda, and same with any other drug cartel. Like I say, criminals will always be criminals.
All right.
There were criminals during biblical times. There were criminals in ancient Egypt.
But then here's the elephant in the room, Victor. Sorry to cut you off. Are we ready? And what I mean is, we find so many startup entrepreneurs, and I've worked individually, and as a firm, we've worked with a number of startup organizations. Most of them are working in the fintech space. They are working in the application space. So they are making third-party applications, hoping that some users will use them. And so, for instance, in your case, a person would make a fintech product that allows transactions over a mobile device. But are we ready when people struggle to pay for bandwidth? When internet access is still very much a big issue, especially in rural areas. So you are an advocate for blockchain technology, Bitcoin. Is that not too soon?
No. When it comes to technology, you are never too soon for it. Africa is well positioned to do something like what we call leapfrogging, which is because we lack legacy institutions and because we lack legacy infrastructure, the cost of switching for a typical user from them using cash to using a crypto wallet is negligible. They do not have as many barriers to entry as you'd find in other countries. So if you go to a developed economy like the US, they have a very sophisticated and robust banking infrastructure with widely distributed branches, networks, etc. Yeah. But in Zimbabwe, you don't have that. You still have a system where people are putting money on a bus and then they're sending it, right? And the reason they're doing that is because that infrastructure doesn't yet exist. So when we talk about crypto, when we talk about blockchain, these are technologies someone can access with USSD. These are technologies someone can access using WhatsApp. These are technologies someone can access using a $30 Android phone. They don't require someone to have a high performance machine as a lot of people would like it to seem. It's actually extremely simple technology. If this country could have adopted EcoCash, they certainly can adopt digital assets. because you're basically using very similar infrastructure and very similar models on how you actually onboard users, including agency models that allow you to actually empower people and create entrepreneurship. Because that's one of the key things that we need in Zimbabwe, right? We have a growing population of extremely young, highly educated people that do not have access to formal employment opportunities. And that is a ticking time bomb. Because if that trend continues for another 10 years, we're going to have a wide population base of unskilled people that also have no experience in the workplace. Okay. So what these new technologies do is, at least at the bare minimum, they allow you to transform someone who's not being productive to become economically productive. So even if the marginal contribution to our GDP is 1%, we're talking about billions of dollars in terms of value that would have created. And that is not something that, as a developing country, we do not have the luxury to pick and choose, unfortunately. Right? We need to develop.
We need. Yeah.
So we can is much similar to the energy, so the communication around energy and the climate, to say, can a country like Zimbabwe not burn coal because of climate change? The US, China, and all the developed countries had hundreds of years of burning coal, right?
Yeah.
And their economies grew.
Look at them now.
And they do not have problems with electricity. So tiny Zimbabwe cannot stand and be sort of a social justice warrior and be on the forefront of trying to do impossible things when you already have at the bare minimum the resources you need to get things done. So we need energy, and we need financial services, and we need our people to be highly skilled, and we need our country to have an economy that is not entirely based on agriculture and mining, and an economy that is based on a service sector, to be able to export even the IP we develop to our neighboring countries. Because you do not see that right now in Zimbabwe. No matter how big a bank is in Zimbabwe, you do not see it in Mozambique. You do not see it in Zambia, right? So you can have a very big brand in Zimbabwe.
We have no room for expansion.
But we have no room for expansion. One of the key things I like saying is there's no point in trying to be the biggest guy at a growth point. Okay. Because the day you go to a town, you realize you're very small. The day you go to a city, you realize you're very, very small. And the day you go to Dubai, you feel like you've been lied to your whole life. So what we need to do is we need to normalize this behavior of turning our companies into regional and then global companies. And the companies that can do that, to be honest, are now companies in technology, companies in the service sector, because
there's opportunity for scale.
There's opportunity for scale. The same software Victor creates in Zimbabwe can be used in China. It can be used in India. It's not put in a shipping container. It doesn't have to go through Forbes border. It doesn't have to go through Beta. It is just in the air. And if we promote that, it means we're going to create much more access and liquidity for our economy, which we desperately need right now.
Oh, Victor, I'm going to talk you into becoming a lawyer. You're so articulate. And any last words, particularly in regard to the changes you'd like to see in the law surrounding your business? What challenges, legal challenges, as your business first have you faced as an entrepreneur? What challenges and changes would you like to see going forward?
Yeah, that's a very important question. So it's actually more of a lack of clarity, right? Where everything exists in the gray area. Is it legal? Is it illegal? Nobody knows, because there isn't any consistent policy around that. And what that does is that it puts businesses in this catch-22 situation where they can't actually move, right? So companies like mine face the inherent risk that whatever you are doing, you could wake up tomorrow and there's a new SI that says what you're doing should not be allowed. But constitutionally, it might mean something completely different. So, we need to have extreme clarity on what the policy says. If there is no policy, let's have a consultative process that includes the people actually building in these solutions. Because you cannot create policy on crypto using traditional bankers.
Yeah.
Because they're not in that space.
You need the victors of this world.
You need to invite people that are actually doing something in that space.
Yeah.
And that actually would help the regulator and it would help the central government be able to have a comprehensive and investor-friendly policy that is actually going to bring in much needed FDI here. So it's really a matter of being able to have that clarity to say what we are doing, can we actually implement the solutions? Can we remove the fear that some of the banks have when it comes to dealing with businesses like mine? Because the bank might say, if I touch this money, if I touch these transactions, I might wake up tomorrow and the central bank is knocking at our door. Mm-hmm. So how do we then remove that fear, that uncertainty that they have? Let's have clarity on what the policy around digital assets and cryptocurrency is in Zimbabwe. Because we have companies from Zimbabwe that are now making global news, but back at home, they do not have room to actually move. So we just cannot sort of exist in that uncertain environment. It makes it extremely difficult to build industries, which is what we're interested in doing.
Yeah, I saw with Dash in Ghana, after getting a Series A funding of $32 million, the government closed doors on them the next day. But that's in Ghana. Thank you so much, Victor. Really interesting conversation, and I'm really enlightened. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for being a good friend.
No, thank you for having me. This was extremely exceptional.
Cheers. This has been Unbiased, the flagship podcast of Absolom Attorneys, where we discuss legal topics and business. Thank you.